Iverson draws Jordan now.
Defense whatsoever to that. 7 minutes into the first quarter.
NBA legends were asked about Allen Iverson's heart, and they did not start with a championship ring. They started with a body that should not have survived the NBA at all. Iverson never won a title. He stood a generous 6 feet tall. He weighed about 165 pounds. He played in an era packed with giant defenders and huge men guarding the rim. None of that should have worked. Yet the players who faced him kept saying the same thing. They talked about his heart. Picture him in 2001, dragging a battered body through the playoffs, refusing to slow down, and reaching the NBA Finals as the smallest man on the floor. And if that kind of fight is why you still remember Iverson, use the hype feature right now and give this video some hype as we look at why the legends respected him so much. He was hurt in more places than most players admit to in a career, and he still logged 46 and 2/10 minutes a night across 22 playoff games. He kept driving at defenders twice his size, like the pain did not apply to him. Once you understand what he carried into that finals run, you start to understand why Kobe Bryant obsessed over him, why Shaquille O'Neal respected him, and why LeBron James says he wanted to be him. Why did some of the toughest, most decorated men in basketball history talk about a 6-foot guard like he was the fiercest competitor they had ever faced? When people talk about Iverson's heart, they are not just being poetic. Heart means something specific in basketball language, and it is worth being precise about what that word actually covers. It means competitive resolve. It means pain tolerance most people cannot imagine. It means fearlessness when a much bigger man is standing between you and the rim. It means refusing to yield, even when your body is screaming at you to stop. It means attacking larger players again and again, no matter how many times they knock you down. It means playing through fatigue, through injury, through pressure, and still finding a way to perform at the highest level. Iverson's resume backs this up. He won 4 scoring titles. He was named MVP in 2001. He made 11 All-Star teams. Those numbers matter, but they were never the reason his peers talked about him with such awe. The legends who respected Iverson were not simply counting his trophies. They were describing something they felt when they stood across from him or stood beside him in a locker room. They were describing a will that seemed bigger than his body. To understand why that mattered so much, you have to understand the world Iverson was playing in. Basketball has always rewarded height. Taller players create shots more easily. They rebound more easily. They protect the rim and cover more ground on defense. The NBA of Iverson's era was full of enormous interior defenders and long physical wing players built to punish anyone who dared enter the paint. Iverson stood at a generous 6 feet. He weighed around 165 pounds. Every time he drove into the lane, the collision looked worse for him than for the man guarding him. Every single possession asked the same question. Would he back down? He never did. Night after night, he walked onto a court where almost everyone else on the floor had a physical advantage over him. That was simply the reality of his career from his very first game to his very last. He never had the option of relying on size the way so many of his peers could. Every advantage he found he had to create himself, through speed, through skill, and through sheer stubborn will. Think about what that meant night after night. A guard his size had no natural advantage in the paint. He could not simply outmuscle anyone. He could not shield the ball with size the way a bigger forward could. So every drive he made was a choice to accept contact he did not have to accept. He could have pulled up for jumpers all night and avoided the danger completely. Instead, he kept attacking the most dangerous part of the floor, over and over, season after season. That pattern is exactly what made grown men, some of the toughest competitors the sport has ever produced, start to talk about him differently than they talked about other scorers. This is also why his statistics only tell part of the story. Plenty of players have scored a lot of points. Far fewer have done it while absorbing the punishment. Iverson absorbed on a nightly basis, at his size, against opponents that outweighed him by 70 or 80 pounds. His scoring titles prove he was brilliant. His willingness to keep driving into danger, possession after possession, is what proves he had heart. That refusal to back down is what turns a talented player into a legend. It is also what pulled one particular rival into a years-long obsession. That rival did not just respect Iverson from a distance. He studied him like a puzzle he needed to solve. And in doing so, he became one of the greatest students of Iverson's game that basketball has ever seen. His name was Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant and Allen Iverson entered the NBA together in the same famous draft class of 1996. From the very start, their paths crossed in a way that shaped both of their careers. On November 12, 1996, Iverson scored 35 points against the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden. That same night, Kobe played only 5 minutes in a Lakers win over Houston. Kobe was still finding his footing as a rookie, sitting behind veterans, waiting for his chance. Later that night, back in his hotel room, Kobe watched Iverson's highlights on SportsCenter. According to the record of that moment, Kobe reacted with pure frustration. He flipped tables, he broke chairs. It was not jealousy in a petty sense. It was the shock of watching a fellow rookie, a smaller guard, dominate an NBA game while Kobe barely got off the bench. That night pushed Kobe to believe his own effort was not enough. He needed to train harder. He needed to become something more than talented. Iverson had, without even meaning to, lit a fire under one of the greatest competitors the sport would ever produce. Most rookies would have shrugged that off as one highlight reel among many. Kobe did not. He carried that frustration with him into the gym, into his workouts, into the way he thought about his own potential. Watching a fellow rookie, someone his own age, someone who had entered the league in the very same draft, dominate a game on a national stage while he sat on the bench, forced Kobe to re-examine everything about his own preparation. It was not enough to simply be talented. Iverson had shown him that talent alone would not be enough to separate himself from the pack. That fire only grew. On March 19, 1999, Iverson dropped 41 points and 10 assists on Kobe's Lakers in Philadelphia. It was not just a big scoring night. It was proof that Kobe's improved effort still was not enough to slow Iverson down. Kobe realized that raw hustle could not solve this problem. He needed real answers, so he asked for what the story calls the file on AI. He wanted every scrap of information basketball could offer him. Kobe studied Iverson's high school tape from Bethel. He studied his college tape from Georgetown. He broke down Iverson's professional possessions play by play, looking for patterns in how Iverson attacked, how he changed speeds, how he used hesitation to create just enough space to get past a defender. Kobe even studied how great white sharks hunt seals, looking for lessons in patience, timing, and the perfect angle of attack. He was not comparing Iverson to a predator to insult him. He was trying to understand the same instincts that made a shark's hunting so effective: patience, precision, and picking the exact right moment to strike, and applying those lessons to guarding the fastest first step in the league. Iverson's game was so difficult to solve that Kobe needed to reach outside basketball entirely to find the right comparison. Think about that for a moment. This was not a young player casually watching film the night before a game. This was one of the most driven athletes in the world, treating a single opposing guard like a scientific problem that needed to be solved from every possible angle. From high school tape to college tape to nature documentaries. That level of obsession does not happen for an ordinary opponent. It happens when someone recognizes a threat unlike anything they have faced before. All of that preparation led to February 20th, 2000. Kobe asked to guard Iverson at halftime. He held Iverson scoreless for the entire second half. It would be easy to read that moment as proof that Iverson had a weakness. The real story is the opposite. It took one of the most gifted, most obsessive competitors in basketball history years of dedicated study just to slow Iverson down for a single half of a single game. That is not a story about Iverson's limits. It is a story about how much respect his game demanded. Kobe eventually put his admiration into words that basketball fans still repeat today. He said, "We should all be fortunate that Allen Iverson wasn't 6'5". Think about what that sentence really means. Iverson already had blinding speed. He already had elite skill. He already had courage that let him attack anyone in front of him. He already had a motor that never seemed to run out. Kobe was saying that if you added several more inches of height to all of that, the rest of the league would have had no answer at all. Iverson's size was, in Kobe's eyes, the only thing keeping the league even remotely balanced against him. Their story did not end as rivals. In August 2020, after Kobe's death, Iverson wrote a tribute called Dear Kobe for the Players Tribune. In it, Iverson called Kobe the toughest man that I've ever seen in this game. He called him a cold-blooded serial killer. He called him the fiercest competitor I've ever seen. Those are not soft words. They are the words of one warrior recognizing another. Iverson and Kobe came from different backgrounds. They had different bodies, different builds, different styles. But underneath all of that, they saw the exact same thing in each other. A refusal to give anything less than everything, on every single possession, for as long as the game lasted. What makes this story so powerful is that Iverson did not simply earn Kobe's respect the way a player earns applause from an opponent after a good game. Iverson changed how Kobe prepared. He changed how hard Kobe trained. He raised the bar for what obsession with basketball could even look like. A man who would go on to become one of the greatest competitors of all time needed years to find an answer for Iverson. And even then, he still walked away in awe of him. That kind of respect does not stay in the past. It carries forward. And nowhere would Iverson's price for greatness become more visible than on the biggest stage basketball has to offer, the 2001 NBA Finals, where Kobe and his Lakers stood on the other side of the floor. Watching Iverson push a battered, undersized body through the fight of his life, refusing at every turn to let his damaged body dictate how hard he was willing to play. The 2000-01 season is where Iverson's heart stopped being a talking point and became something you could see with your own eyes. That year, Iverson won the NBA MVP award. Philadelphia had a defense built on toughness, but the roster was thin on offensive weapons around him. That meant Iverson had to carry an enormous scoring burden, almost every single night, under head coach Larry Brown. And with Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal waiting on the other side of the league, Iverson pushed that undermanned Philadelphia team all the way to the NBA Finals. He did it while his body was falling apart. During that playoff run, Iverson played through a broken finger. He played through bursitis in his elbow. He played through a sprained ankle. He played through a severe tailbone contusion. He played through facial lacerations. Any one of those injuries would keep most athletes on the bench for weeks. Stack them all together: a broken bone, an inflamed joint, a damaged ankle, a bruised tailbone, and cuts on his face, and you would expect a normal player to shut things down for the good of his long-term health. Iverson did the opposite. He kept lacing up his shoes. He kept walking onto the floor. He kept attacking the paint like none of it mattered, as if his body had simply decided that pain was a problem for some other day. Think about what that decision actually costs a person. Every game meant more contact on an already damaged tailbone. Every drive meant more strain on an already injured ankle. Every collision risked reopening cuts that had barely started to heal. There was no version of that playoff run where Iverson was protecting himself. He was spending his body night after night because his team needed him to keep going. The numbers from that stretch are hard to believe. Across 22 playoff games, Iverson averaged 46, 2 minutes a night. He often attempted more than 25 shots a game, and he did all of it while repeatedly driving into defenses built around some of the biggest, most physical players in the league. This was not a single heroic night. It was weeks of sustained punishment that he simply refused to let slow him down. Game after game, series after series, he kept absorbing hits that would have sent most players to the trainer's table for good, and he kept coming back the very next night ready to do it again. Widen the view even further, and the pattern becomes even clearer. This was not a one-season burst of effort. It was a career built on the same relentless workload year after year. In 1998-99, during a shortened season, Iverson averaged 41, 5 minutes and 26, 8 points a game. The next year, 1999-00, he averaged 40, 8 minutes and 28, 4 points. Then came that MVP season, 2001, with 42, 0 minutes and 31, 1 points a game. He followed it with 2001-02, averaging an even heavier 43, 7 minutes and 31, 4 points. In 2002-03, he played every single one of Philadelphia's 82 games, averaging 42, 5 minutes and 27, 6 points. In 2003-04, despite dealing with severe contusions, he still averaged 42, 5 minutes and 26, 4 points. In 2004-05, he averaged 42, 3 minutes and 30, 7 points, adding nearly 8 assists a night. And in 2005-06, at 30 years old, he posted a career high of 33, 0 points a game while still playing 43, 1 minute a night. Look at that pattern as a whole. This was not one great playoff run. This was close to a decade of carrying enormous minutes and enormous scoring totals at the same time, on a frame that was smaller than almost every guard he faced. Season after season, the minutes stayed high. Season after season, the scoring stayed high. There was no dip where he eased off to protect his body. No stretch where he quietly scaled back his workload the way most players eventually do as the wear adds up. His style demanded constant physical contact. Every single drive put his body in danger. whether it was Game 1 of the regular season or a pivotal night deep in the playoffs. And he kept choosing to drive anyway, year after year, long past the point where most players would have adjusted their game to protect themselves. Other guards learn to pick their spots as their careers go on. Iverson kept attacking the same way at 23 that he did at 30, refusing to let age or accumulated damage change who he was on the floor. That kind of workload is difficult to picture in today's game, where teams carefully manage a star's minutes and rest him on back-to-back nights. Iverson played through pain that would end most careers, and he did it at a pace that would exhaust players twice his size. This is where Iverson's heart stopped being an opinion and became something closer to a measurable fact. It showed up in his minutes, it showed up in his shot totals, it showed up in the list of injuries he refused to let stop him, and it showed up every single time he chose to drive back into the paint instead of settling for something safer. You can list his awards, and they are real. But the numbers behind those awards tell a different kind of story. They tell you how much a body can absorb when the person carrying it refuses to stop. They tell you what it looks like when a competitor decides that fatigue, bruises, and broken bones are simply not good enough reasons to hold back. The people who watched this happen up close, night after night, in practice and in games, saw something even the box score could not capture. His coach and his teammates in Philadelphia carried memories of Iverson that went far beyond what fans ever saw from their seats or their televisions. Memories built from years of watching him limp into the locker room and still show up ready to compete the very next day. Larry Brown coached Iverson in Philadelphia from 1997 to 2003. Their relationship was never simple. They clashed over practice attendance. They clashed over team discipline. Those disagreements became public, filling headlines and sports talk shows for years. On the surface, it looked like a coach who did not fully trust his best player. Reporters covered every disagreement. Fans debated whether Brown and Iverson could ever truly get along. It would have been easy from a distance to assume that Brown doubted Iverson's commitment to the game. Underneath that friction, Brown deeply respected Iverson's toughness and endurance. He watched Iverson absorb hit after hit during that 2001 run to the finals. He watched him play more than 42 minutes a night while carrying a roster that leaned on him for almost everything on offense. Brown knew exactly what Iverson's body was going through, because he was the one filling out the lineup card every single night, watching a battered guard walk back onto the floor anyway. Years later, Brown said something that reveals just how much Iverson's career stayed with him. He said, "I thought he could be the very best forever. And I thought if he would have approached it a little bit differently, then he could have been better than who he really was." And when you're a coach, that's something that eats on you. Break that quote down, and you find something far more generous than criticism. Brown believed Iverson's ceiling was even higher than the incredible career he actually had. His regret only existed because Iverson's talent and heart were so enormous that Brown could see an even greater version sitting just out of reach. That is not a coach saying his player lacked effort or courage. That is a coach saying his player had so much heart that it still weighs on him. Years later, wondering what more was possible, Brown watched how much pain Iverson accepted for that team, and that memory clearly never left him. It would have been easy for Brown to simply criticize Iverson and leave it there. He did not. Every version of his complaints circled back to admiration. He was not describing a player who needed to care more. He was describing a player who already cared so much, who already gave so much of his body to the game, that Brown could only imagine how much higher he might have climbed with a few things done differently. That is the kind of regret reserved for extraordinary talent, not ordinary effort. Tim Thomas, who played alongside Iverson in Philadelphia, saw a similar side of him up close. Thomas did not see Iverson from across an arena or through a television broadcast. He saw him in the locker room in practice and on long road trips away from the cameras. Thomas said Iverson had the biggest heart, man, on and off the court. He described Iverson's ability to keep pushing through painful injuries as a different type of animal mentality. That phrase is not about aggression. It describes a level of toughness that goes beyond what most professional athletes are willing to endure. Thomas placed Iverson in the same class as Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. He explained that Iverson did not have their height. He did not have the same physical tools. But his will to win, according to Thomas, belonged in exactly the same tier as those two legends. That is an enormous statement coming from a teammate who watched Iverson every single day, not just during his best highlights, but during the quiet, painful moments that never made it onto television. Thomas saw the mornings after brutal games. He saw the treatment tables, the ice packs, the visible toll of a style that never let up. And even with all of that in view, he still placed Iverson beside two of the greatest competitors the sport has ever known. Between Larry Brown's regret and Tim Thomas's praise, a clear picture forms. The people closest to Iverson, the ones who saw the daily cost of his style, the ones who watched him ice his body down after games and still show up ready to play the next night, never once questioned his heart. Their frustrations were about scheduling and structure. Their admiration was about something far deeper and far more permanent. That same fearlessness that impressed his coach and his teammate is exactly what impressed the man who represented the biggest physical challenge Iverson ever faced, a man built like a mountain standing directly between Iverson and the rim. A man whose sheer size made every single collision with him look far more dangerous than it did with anyone else in the league. Shaquille O'Neal was one of the most dominant physical forces the sport of basketball has ever produced. Iverson was a small guard standing across from him. In the 2001 NBA Finals, those two very different bodies finally shared the same floor at the same time. O'Neal has said Iverson was one of the toughest players he ever had to guard. He has also called Iverson the best player never to win an NBA championship. Those are not casual compliments. They come from a man who spent his career being the most physically overwhelming presence on almost every floor he ever stepped onto. Think about the paint during that era. Many guards changed direction the moment they saw a huge rim protector waiting inside. They kicked the ball out, they pulled up short. They avoided contact whenever they could because getting hit by a 300-pound body at full speed is not something most players want to experience twice. Iverson did not operate that way. He drove directly into the chests of the biggest men in the league. He absorbed hard fouls that would knock most guards sideways. He crashed to the floor, sometimes hard, sometimes in front of a national television audience. And then he got back up every single time and did it again on the very next possession. That refusal to change course, even against the most punishing interior defenders in basketball, is exactly what earned him the respect of the players guarding the rim. It is one thing to be fearless against an average defender. It is another thing entirely to keep attacking the most physically dominant player of a generation, possession after possession, without ever backing down. Imagine standing at the top of the key, looking at a wall of a man built to punish anyone who came near him, and choosing to drive at him anyway. Most players would find a reason to pass the ball or settle for a jump shot instead. Iverson kept choosing the harder path, again and again, because settling for the safe option was never who he was. O'Neal's praise carries extra weight because of where it comes from. He was not a guard admiring another guard's footwork. He was the single most imposing physical presence Iverson ever faced, and he still walked away calling Iverson one of the toughest opponents of his career. That kind of respect does not come from watching someone succeed against weaker competition. It comes from standing directly in the path of that competitor and feeling exactly how much courage it took for him to keep coming anyway. Consider how rare that combination really is. Most players who thrive against overwhelming size do so by avoiding direct contact, by relying on quickness alone to stay away from danger. Iverson chose the opposite approach. He went straight at the danger, over and over, trusting his own will to get him through whatever punishment waited for him inside. Put Kobe's perspective next to Shaq's, and you start to see the full shape of what Iverson's peers respected. Kobe studied the way Iverson attacked from the perimeter. The first step, the change of speed, the ability to create just enough space to get a shot off. Shaq respected what Iverson did once he got all the way into the paint, the willingness to absorb enormous contact and keep pushing toward the rim anyway. Between the two of them, they covered both ends of Iverson's game, the outside threat and the interior courage, and both men came away with the same conclusion. This was a competitor who refused to be intimidated by anyone, whether that opponent was quick enough to stay in front of him or big enough to flatten him at the rim. Two of the greatest players of that entire era, standing on opposite ends of the physical spectrum, arrived at the exact same judgment about the smallest man on the floor. That kind of agreement, coming from two legends who rarely agreed on anything easily, says everything about how rare Iverson's courage really was. That kind of fearlessness did not stay contained to Iverson's own era. It reached forward into the next generation of NBA superstars, shaping how they saw the game and who they wanted to become. LeBron James grew up watching Iverson play, and Iverson became far more than just a favorite player to him. LeBron came of age in the late 1990s and early 2000s, right as Iverson was becoming one of the most recognizable stars in the entire league. and Iverson shaped the way LeBron thought about what greatness could look like. LeBron has said, "I didn't want to be Michael or Magic. I wanted to be Allen Iverson." Think about how remarkable that statement really is. Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson represent the classic model of NBA superstardom. Players built like ideal athletes, smooth, polished, and physically overwhelming in obvious ways. LeBron, who would grow into a 6'9", 250-pound frame, still looked past those towering examples and pointed to a 6-foot guard instead. Iverson represented something different to him: authenticity, courage, and an emotional honesty that LeBron connected with on a deeper level than pure physical admiration. LeBron had every reason to look up to players who matched his own gifts, players built for dominance in the same way he was. Instead, he found something more compelling in a guard who had to fight for every inch he ever gained on the floor. LeBron also called Iverson, pound for pound, the greatest player ever. That phrase, pound for pound, comes from combat sports, where fighters are judged purely on skill and heart, without any credit given for simply being bigger than an opponent. Applying that idea to Iverson means judging him without giving him a boost for size, and instead comparing his skill, his courage, his impact, and his production directly against the body that carried all of it. Viewed through that lens, Iverson's career looks even more remarkable, because every one of his accomplishments came without the physical advantages that most of his peers relied on. Take away the extra inches, the extra pounds, the built-in edge that comes from simply being bigger than the man across from you, and Iverson's numbers still stand out. That is exactly the point LeBron was making when he chose that phrase instead of a simpler compliment. The admiration between the two of them ran in both directions. In 2016, Iverson was asked which active NBA player carried a spirit similar to his own. He did not choose a smaller, quick guard whose game resembled his. He chose LeBron James. Iverson said, "LeBron ain't got none of my game. You know what I mean. But his heart is all mine." Read that statement carefully. Iverson was not saying LeBron copied his crossover or his footwork. Their games looked nothing alike. What Iverson meant was that they shared something underneath the surface: a refusal to quit, a willingness to shoulder immense pressure, a responsibility to carry an entire team's expectations without flinching, and a level of fight that could not be taught, only inherited. That exchange between the two of them captures something bigger than a single interview or a single quote. It shows how Iverson's heart became a standard, something passed down from one generation of superstars to the next. LeBron did not inherit Iverson's exact style. He inherited the fire underneath it. The same refusal to yield that Kobe respected, that Shaq respected, that Larry Brown and Tim Thomas witnessed up close every single day. It says something remarkable that a player as gifted and as physically dominant as LeBron would look past his own natural advantages and choose to model his competitive identity after a guard who had none of those advantages. That choice tells you how much weight Iverson's example carried, even among the very best players the sport has ever produced. Iverson's influence on LeBron was never just about basketball skill. It was about identity, about what it meant to carry yourself with total honesty on the court, refusing to hide who you were no matter who was watching. A young superstar with every physical gift in the world still found something worth chasing in a smaller man's fight. And that says as much about Iverson's impact as any trophy could. That kind of influence reached far beyond any single player, shaping the entire culture of the league that came after him. Iverson changed more than the way the game was played. He changed the image of what an NBA superstar was allowed to look like. He wore cornrows at a time when that was still unusual for the league's biggest stars. He wore visible tattoos. He wore compression sleeves that became one of his signature looks. He carried the energy of street ball straight into a corporate, highly polished league, and he refused to soften any of it for anyone's comfort. He did not introduce a fashion trend for the sake of attention. He simply refused to hide who he was, even when that honesty brought criticism from outside the sport. That refusal to change came from the exact same place as his refusal to change direction against a huge defender in the paint. Both forms of courage came from the same internal strength. He did not back down from public scrutiny any more than he backed down from a 300-pound rim protector standing between him and the basket. That authenticity is part of why players like LeBron James, Dwyane Wade, and Carmelo Anthony felt such a strong emotional connection to him. They did not just admire his scoring or his handle. They admired a player who walked into every room exactly as himself, without apology, and who backed that identity up with the same fearlessness every single night on the floor. Step back and look at the larger basketball picture. Height has always created an advantage in this sport. Taller players generally have an easier time creating shots, grabbing rebounds, and protecting the basket. Iverson won 4 scoring titles as a guard who stood at a generous 6 feet. His career pushed directly against the belief that only tall wings or dominant big men could truly control a game's scoring. He proved that a smaller player, armed with enough skill and enough heart, could stand at the very top of the league's scorers year after year. His example turned heart into something closer to an equalizer. In a league built to reward size, Iverson showed that will and courage could close a physical gap that most people assumed was impossible to close. That lesson did not just apply to Iverson himself. It became part of how an entire generation of players and an entire generation of fans understood what greatness in basketball could actually mean. Long after his final game, that lesson still holds up. Every time a smaller player refuses to be pushed around by a bigger opponent, every time a guard drives into the paint without flinching at the size of the man waiting there, some piece of what Iverson proved is still being played out on basketball courts everywhere. Put all of these perspectives side by side, and one picture comes into focus. Kobe Bryant studied Iverson for years just to find a way to slow him down for half of one game. Shaquille O'Neal respected the fearlessness that let Iverson drive into the biggest men in the sport without ever hesitating. Larry Brown carried a quiet regret for years, not because Iverson lacked heart, but because he had so much of it. Tim Thomas watched him fight through pain every single day and placed him beside Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant without a second thought. LeBron James wanted to inherit his spirit more than he wanted to copy any other legend who came before him. Iverson never needed a championship ring to earn any of that deep, lasting respect. He earned it fully from the men who guarded him, coached him, played beside him, and grew up watching him, one hard-fought possession at a time. In a sport built for giants, standing at a generous 6 feet and carrying a battered, undersized body through some of the most demanding moments the game has ever produced, Allen Iverson proved that heart could make a smaller man feel absolutely enormous.